remind me to give you these back. Okay, sorry for the delay. Thank you all for being here with the special meeting. Today is December the 30th. Welcome to our City Council meeting. As I've announced previously, we are streaming live on our City of Madison YouTube channel and archiving. We have a special meeting tonight to take care of some year-end accounting business. So I'll ask our clerk for a roll call, please.
Chair Patrick Tevenow.
Here.
Carla Krebs.
Here.
Lucy DeTillo.
Here.
Josh Schaefer, absent. Joel Storm.
Here.
Jim Bartlett.
Here.
And Josh Wilbur.
Here.
Okay. We do have a regular meeting scheduled for Tuesday, January the 7th, so we will not have our normal agenda tonight. We'll start with, we do have two resolutions, and I'll start with Resolution 2024-13C, which is the temporary transfer of funds between utilities and parks. This authorizes a temporary transfer between funds for a period not to exceed 6 months. We do have our Deputy Mayor McGee. Please note her for attendance on screen. Turn it over. If you'd like, Council, I can read a resolution, or we. All right. Turn it over to discussion. So we have 2024-13C for the transferring of funds to essentially cover off on deficits in the park budget for 2024.
I think it's important, before we have any kind of vote on this, that the public understands why we are looking to do this. If we could just get a brief overview of.
Yeah, let me just read the resolution because I think it clarifies in there. Thank you. Whereas the City of Madison operates a Parks Department for the enjoyment of the community by maintaining public parks, offering programming for area youth, seniors and adults, as well as operating a public golf course, campground, pickleball courts, swimming pool, and other facilities. Whereas the service provided by the City of Madison Parks is important to the health and enjoyment of the community, and whereas in order to address historical operating deficits relating to bringing these services to the community and deferred investments in park facilities, and whereas Indiana Code 36-1-8-4A permits by resolution a transfer of funds in need of money, and whereas Indiana Code 36-1-8-4B allows for declaration of an emergency and state that funds will be repaid by a date not to exceed 6 months. Whereas to eliminate the operating deficit incurred in 2024 due to capital expenditures for deferred maintenance items and new investment, and a reduction in tax levy for parks, as well as budget deficits, it is necessary to temporarily transfer funds within the City of Madison sewer utility operations. Whereas the Common Council of the City of Madison determines that an emergency exists due to operating deficits of the Parks Department and preventing it from operating in a sound fiscal and physical condition as required by law, and the temporary transfer of funds is necessary. Now therefore be it resolved by the Common Council, the following is transferred for a prescribed period not to exceed 6 months. And this is from the Sewer Utilities Capital Improvement Fund of $575,000 to Parks NRO Fund 2211 in the amount of $546,346, $546,346, the Community Development and Event Fund $70, and Park Donation Fund $28,584. Council, I'll mention that this is a procedure we used for a corrective action that we took for our solid waste operation in December of 2023, and this method is prescribed by State Board of Accounts for transferring between funds to cover a deficit. We need a motion to approve the resolution in a second, and we can open up for more discussion.
I'll move that we approve this resolution as stated.
I second the motion.
Open up for discussion. I would just state for clarification purposes, we do have a plan for the repayment of this temporary transfer, just as we did with solid waste, and we'll be working on implementing that plan. And the transfer back to the Utilities Capital Improvement Fund will happen before June the 30th of 2025.
I disagreed with this loan when it came to the deficit at the transfer station. However, with the transfer station budget deficits, it was a little bit more straightforward in how we get that revenue back, because we offer a service up there, and we know we need to raise the rates X to fill this and pay this loan back. It's a little bit more complicated to cut within the parks budget and repay this, and I'm disappointed that it has come to such a large deficit here. And this is a difficult decision whether or not to do this, or just to leave the deficit and have the state give us a ding on our audit because of it. That's all I have to say on the matter.
Yeah, I think, I'm kind of with you in that, Patrick, but I also understand that in the scheme of things, the problem can resolve, and I think it's going to give us some oversight. I think we're going to have added accountability, so I know that's an intangible, but I think the real work begins now with digging into these things to ensure it doesn't happen on a larger level. So whatever your decision, I respect that, but that's kind of where my reason is going.
I'll just respond to that, which is this is a method prescribed by state statute. We do have a plan, a corrective action plan relative to our appropriations for 2025. There will be a higher property tax levy for the Parks Department, which will, offset this substantially. It is a deficit that we didn't expect, and we're very disappointed with. We intend to take corrective action with regards to appropriations in 2025 to make sure this is absorbed and never happens again. But I am confident in the outcome, which is going to be a positive one.
Is there any intention to begin rebuilding the city's rainy day fund to prevent us from having to borrow from the sewer capital utility fund in the future? Because this is twice now in about a year's time period where, had we had funds in our rainy day, to me this qualifies as a rainy day. We could have borrowed from the rainy day, repaid the rainy day, but now that fund's empty.
True, but it's been raining for about 5 years. And what I mean by that is, in 2020, we dealt with the impact of COVID. In 2021, we dealt with the impact of and still with a flash flood in our community. In 22, we had to close Crystal Beach because of significant deferred maintenance. A lot of these problems that you just mentioned, which is the second year in a row of doing something because of not having a rainy day, that rainy day fund, wasn't very significant to begin with relative to the amount of investment that has been deferred by this city over a very, very long time. It's hard to put money in a rainy day fund when there's millions of dollars of deferred expenditures. It's hard to say unless you defer more, right? And so the answer to your question is yes. Yes, we are going to drill down, and what we've been doing is not rainy day, but we've been working on our general fund. So as we've gone through the last couple of budget workshops, Councilman, you've noticed that we've worked really hard to move expenditures out of the general fund to give it more liquidity and identify other sources of revenue outside of tax levies to offset our budget. I'm not sure if the public knows much about how our budget works, but probably less than 2/3 of our budget is actually funded by property tax levy. And property taxes are capped constitutionally for every person who owns property. The costs of doing business, as you know, post-COVID is probably up at least 25 to 30%. But our budget creeps up about 2 to 2.5%. I'm sorry, our tax levy creeps up about 2 to 2.5% a year. Doesn't even come close to offsetting the increases of labor, benefits, materials, supplies, supply chain issues. We're trying to improve our community all at the same time. So there's a holistic view of things that we're taking to do what you just described, and I wouldn't put it in the context of rainy day fund, I'd put it in the context of having a capital plan so that we're not relying on our operating budget to Band-Aid everything. Everything has been Band-Aided for a very, very long time. We have to have a real, which is what we're working on, solid capital plan. And you saw that in action in 2024. Just 2024 alone, that capital planning brought us a brand new Crystal Beach. It brought us a renovated Gaines Park. It brought us the Ohio River Legacy Park. This is just parks assets. It also, that capital plan, brought us a brand new way and safer way to collect our solid waste and recyclables. So you can put it in the, I would say, the context of it is much bigger than the limits we have to put money in a rainy day fund. Rainy day would be great, but it has been pouring down, and we've done, I think, a very good job of capital planning. Same thing with like the 2025 capital plan for Madison's Main Street. So what's happening, what you're asking, Councilman, is happening. It's just that we don't talk about it in the context of rainy day. We talk about it in the context of broad, big picture, capital planning. I don't know if that
Yeah.
answered your question or makes you feel better about the decision we're asking you to make tonight. What we're asking you to do tonight is cover off on a deficit that there were some extenuating circumstances. Part of it was discretionary, part of it was not discretionary. But we'll make sure that the corrective action plan in 2025 happens and this deficit won't occur again.
From a layman's perspective, I see the difference of an investment versus a savings. So I understand having the savings of the rainy day, whereas if we can get more return off the investment and mitigate the risk, the money's fungible at that point. I don't know if we're using loss leaders to try to absorb, what we're making from. I think that should, and I agree with you on that, because we do need to have a reserve capital for those. But I think the manner in which we do it, it appears to me is that we're trying to leverage investments at the time to maximize that, so eventually it can be the savings, but.
And that's a good point, which is we've been making tremendous amounts of investment. And as Clerk Treasurer Renierson was saying, there are caps. So when you put in your budget money to go to a rainy day, it is capped. And then the impact of rainy day, which nobody wants, is as you go through and do your future budgets, they're going to look, well, how much money do you have in your rainy day? Let's cut your budget. So there's a whole cause and effect to everything. But what we're really working hard to do is elevate the experience of living in Madison and visiting in Madison, and that's taken on the form of millions of dollars of new investment. But there's more to do, a lot more to do.
I just want to personally apologize because I feel partially responsible for this, being on the park commission and also on the city council, and not doing a good job. And so I just want to personally assure the people that we do have a plan. It's not finalized yet to repay this back, and there will be major changes happening in our Parks Department. And I hope that we can earn your trust back again.
Mr. Mayor, I think it's appropriate, you mentioned an increased tax levy a few minutes ago as part of the plan, and I think it's appropriate to point out that that does not indicate higher taxes for anybody, but rather a change in the allocation of the existing taxes.
That's exactly right. It's just appropriating it specifically for parks, and that appropriation is, I think, around $200 some odd thousand higher than it was for the 2024 year. So one way to look at that is we're returning parks tax levy back to its 2023 level. Which again is still less than half of its operating budget. Council, any more questions? I'll offer an opportunity for anybody in the public who would like to comment on the resolution.
I would just like to say that I'm very disappointed in the state of the Parks Department. But I would also like to say that I would like to see a plan for how we're going to do it prior to making this decision. I think we're kind of doing things backwards. But I do believe that borrowing the money from ourselves, basically, is what we're doing, and paying it back within 6 months is the right thing to do. And I think if we do this right, that the Parks Department will be better than it's ever been. And it's a long, long process of years of things to fix, and it doesn't come quickly. So that's all I have to say.
Yeah, and on that, I would
It's-
say
it's-
that, you know, while we're talking about this deficit, which is, not a good thing to be talking about on the literally last business day of the year for council, there have been some great successes in parks, and we're gonna drive the successes with good fiscal management in parks in 2025, and that will allow for even more investment in parks, which is needed. Comments or questions? Name and address, please. Don't mind, Charlie.
Charlie Ferguson, 718 East Second Street. Could I ask how much the budget was for parks this year?
Approximately $1.7 million.
1.7,
Yes,
and we were 500,000 over.
575.
That's a lot. Jim, I agree with you. I came here hoping that you would take your public input, and I definitely think that the tax levy ought to go up, for sure. I question why did it go down from 2023 when you just mentioned us adding 3 new parks, the swim park, the Legacy, Gaines Park. Why did that levy go down when we were taking on increased expenses from all those other parks?
The park levy had nothing to do with the investment that we've made in those capital expenditures. That's a completely different funding source.
But what about the expenses to operate all those parks?
Yes.
Where does that come from?
That does come from the operating budget, and that's where they missed the budget.
Okay.
Now, they also, all of those create revenue. The golf course, the campground, the pool. And a few years ago, we established NRO accounts and said that, because the problem we've had in parks is robbing Peter to pay Paul, so to speak, which is we were experiencing hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars of deficit at the golf course to keep golf rates really, really low and defer maintenance and not improve the golf course. The golf course still needs millions of dollars of investment, but the rest of the park system was suffering. So we established separate NROs so that those operating entities are supposed to be self-sufficient, not reliant on the property tax levy, and then create an organic capital fund to reinvest. Campground is the perfect example that's done that. The other two, the pool, which we had closed for 2 years because of the significance of the condition of it, and the golf course has a lot of deferred maintenance on it. But those are two different funding sets. The tax levy doesn't spend $7 million. That operating tax levy does not spend $7 million on a Crystal Beach. The problem with the way local government is funded is you get a X amount of pie to work with, and you got to try to do it all. Well, you can't do it all, so you defer. You defer your streets, you defer your sidewalks, you defer your equipment. We replaced 25-year-old equipment in our solid waste plant. We have 40-year-old equipment in our fire department. So I'm just saying is that they're two separate things. So it was never expected that the parks budget was going to pay for those big three, but they're supposed to operate and pay for themselves, and they didn't do that.
So that's where we missed out. Well, I personally think, as a citizen here, and I've talked with Carla about it before, I think that maybe the city needs to put up more money for some of these, even if it is a tax rate. I mean, I don't know if you can raise taxes or not, but, a small percentage, I think a lot of the community would go for it because you are offering, these things for the city.
We did $10 million of investment in parks in 2024. We have plans for a $2 million renovation of Welch Park. Brown Gym turns 100 years old next year, and it's got a significant amount of deferred maintenance on it. Rucker's been sitting up there for 30 years. Now is, seeing the consequences over the course of the last decade of lack of investment. So what you're saying is exactly right, which is what we're doing. And over the course of the next 3 years, you're going to see more investment in parks, but we have to be smart about how we formulate our capital planning. And you may be willing, to pay a little bit more. There's a lot of people that don't use the parks. They don't use the library. They don't see the value in some of the things that we need to spend large capital money on. Main Street, it's a $25 million investment. That can't come out of our normal operating budget. So we have to get very creative on how we finance those things and create the capital plan to pay for them. And we did, and Main Street's another great example. We're starting phase 1 of a $25 million restoration of Main Street in 2025.
So I think what Charlie's trying to say is that he would support a park bond
Yeah.
issue,
Yes.
that the money would go directly to the parks.
And
With-
that is, you're
with-
exactly right. That's what we're working on. It takes probably about 6 months after you do the plan to get that put in place. And then you also, again, there's a lot of financing elements that go into it, but we're doing all those things.
I just think maybe we ought to watch our investments. If there comes a lot of expenses with it, that we can't cover the expenses, it sounds like that's what has happened. We've invested in all these things, but we can't cover the expenses. So-
I would disagree with you there. The pool is supposed to be self-supporting. The campground is our revenue producer. We had the golf course almost to break even. We plainly just had some overspending and some unexpected expenditures all happen at the same time in 2024. That won't happen again in 2025.
Mr. Ferguson,
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm really
Yeah.
glad that you bring these
Yeah.
questions up, because they are something that other people would question.
interested in.
Like, how are you spending your money, and then how are you paying to maintain it? And that could be perceived as part of that problem. So you asking those questions so you can clarify, Mr. Mayor, that
I
helps.
can't
That
go
helps
out
a
and
lot
buy
of
I can't go
people.
out and buy a new house or a new car,
Right.
invest in it, if I can't afford the payments on it.
Yeah.
That's just my
And-
thought and my opinion on it. Maybe
Yeah.
maybe no more
No,
investments.
you're right. Yeah,
No more big investments until we can pay for the investments that we made.
no more big
You know.
investments in parks is what you're saying.
Yes. If Parks is $500,000.
You're raising a really good point, which is, okay, how do you correct the deferred maintenance, which is several millions of dollars at Sunrise Golf Course, and keep Sunrise Golf Course open?
Yeah.
That's the
That's the
Rubik
thing
that we're all working on.
Carla and I discussed, about a bond or something. I just feel like the city's going to have to invest. I know I just said you're going to have to watch your investments, but you're going to have to make the investments that make you your money back without adding more expenses
Yes,
to it.
I agree.
So,
Grab that, press that button there. There you
Trying
go.
to figure out and define our sunken cost, like, there's kind of a paradigm in my mind where, or a dichotomy, you have either the sunken cost, right, we're just investing in this thing, keeping it alive for no reason, or it's starving and our solution is to feed it less, so we have to have some kind of objective analysis to say, can this thing get wings, and what that is specifically right now, I think there's debate on. But I would be interested in hearing more what you have to say with some of those investments and understanding, more of a public approach to these things.
Mr. Storm and Mr. Ferguson, I just wanted to let you both know that we have funds this year that are going to be set up for 2025 that are specific just for Crystal Beach, just for the campground, just for Rutgers, and just for the pool.
Golf course.
So, golf course
Yes.
and the pool. Did I say the golf course
You
twice?
said the pool twice.
So, yeah, we've got 4 specific funds. What that actually means in technical terms or layman's terms is we will be able to track what's the incoming money for that facility, what's the outgoing money for that facility. So department head should be able to break those numbers down so you'll be able to see it a little easier. So,
I would like,
That
as soon
helps.
as, like Lucy said, she's having trouble maybe voting on this because she doesn't know what the plan is. I think the public needs to know what the real plan is to fix this problem.
I can tell you what the plan is.
Okay, well, I mean, you hadn't shared it before, so that's why I was
And
concerned.
you know, and again, I could get as granular as you want.
So just
but
highlight,
it's
highlight the big things.
It's three big things, right? One is it is receiving a little over almost $250,000 more in
Tax levy.
allocated property tax levy. All right. The other one is to some of the expenses that were incurred in 2024 that Parks operating budget went toward will not be reincurred in 2025. Right. So you'll get back to a normal operating year. There's going to be an intent focus, as our clerk treasurer was saying. We segregated each of those operating parts of the Parks Department so that we can more properly track the solvency of each of those operations. And then the last one is one of the big areas that was not managed well was seasonal labor. And we'll have a much better handle in 2025 on seasonal labor, because now we'll be in our second operating year of Crystal Beach in particular, and we've set up these funds so we're able to track it to a very granular level at each of those operating entities. We do want to do all that, Charlie, while still focusing on the programming that's important for our community. Our Parks Department has done a phenomenal job on programming, and we've got 2 or 3 new park investments happening. I say they're new, but it's new investments in old parks that is going to increase the life and the quality of the experience at those parks. So there's a lot of momentum going into 2025. It's unfortunate that we found ourselves at the end of the year identifying a major deficit. We do have a plan. Those 3 things I just mentioned: more money from the taxes, less spending on seasonal labor, not experiencing recurring expenses. Just those 3 things alone, let alone having more focus on the fiscal aspects of parks, I'm more than confident that this temporary transfer will be repaid as it's prescribed.
I like the idea of keeping track of all of them. I work up at the golf course. I am seasonal help. I was offended by the comments that we were the reason that you didn't make the comments, but we were the reason why we lost a lot of money. Was the part-time workers, and I was offended by that. I know they worry about the boys being up there, $8.50 an hour. 3 of them sitting on the couch. 1 of them's on the payroll. Nobody knew that the other friends were in there, so that was sort of blown out of proportion. But the money we make is not even a tiny, tiny scratch in $500,000. But definitely need to keep track of each individual thing. I saw a lot of waste there that can be cut out.
Yeah.
Totally. And a lot of it, was brought on bad decision making. And if those things can be taken care of, I like your plan, except for one thing you mentioned at the end. You talked about more investments into more parks. And it's going to add more expenses. Who's taking care of these parks? The Parks Department.
So let me ask you, but you have to do it, because if you don't make the investment, we don't want to close Sunrise Golf Course. So for 4 years, when I came in office, I said, listen, we're not going to fund future deficits in the golf course. We've got to correct this, and that means we've got to find a way to have the golf course support itself and not be supported by $400,000 of other park operating budget. So I don't want to close any parks. I want to make them better so that it can be a better contribution to our community. And we can all do that. But some of your parks, and I would say that out of the 24 parks that we have, probably more than 15 to 20 of those are free to use, free to the public. And let me tell you this too, Charlie, and you may not realize this, that all of our park systems, other than where you pay an admission price, are free to anybody, whether you're visiting here. If you live in Jefferson County, you can use our parks every day. And guess how much money you contribute to our Parks Department? Zero. So I'm just saying is that our city of Madison Parks has phenomenal park system for the size of its community. It has challenging operating budgets. We've got to bifurcate operating budget with capital planning, and we have to decide what type of community we want. And do we want rundown parks? Do we want to close Sunrise Golf Course? Did we want to close Crystal Beach? Are we ready to shutter the Brown Gym? I'd say the answer to that's no.
I
So,
agree.
But you can't on one hand say, and I'm not saying you, as a community, we can't say, I don't need that park, let's close it down. And they're like, well, Brown Gym's pretty doggone important. John Paul Park's pretty important. Rucker's pretty important. I don't know a park that's unimportant. The problem is you go 20 or so years and you defer, that check becomes due.
Yeah.
And here we are.
I'll just say this.
But that has nothing to do, honestly, with 2024 as Parks
Just be
Department.
careful how much more we invest if we cannot pay for it. That's pretty much basically my point.
And
Yeah,
that would-
I love seeing it. If we could have the best parks in the nation, I'd love that, but we got to be able to afford them. And by adding more and more, we are stretching ourselves out. Then you got to bring in more labor to cut more parks.
You gotta water, you gotta irrigate, but again, let's use the Gateway as a great example. Would we rather have the tattoo parlor, the abandoned buildings? You know what I'm saying, is that, there is some, you're
know-
right. There
I
is
know-
a-
No, what you're saying is right, Mr. Ferguson.
So you're
You're
saying
missing,
smart
you're
growth.
missing
Yes.
the expenses that are added to all of this, doing, the gateway. Yeah, it's beautiful. We love it, okay? But now there's more mowing to do and more
True.
upkeep, which is more expenses. So that's why I feel that we have to increase our revenue. We have to increase it on the big four,
Yeah.
the Brown Gym.
Yeah.
But somehow we've got to increase the revenue to take care of all these parks where we do not get any revenue.
Well, this
And
does
that's-
create,
and that's the thing.
this does create jobs, though. These do create services. There are also intangible revenues being actualized, too. I don't disagree with you, but some of these park services, it's very hard to argue the net bottom dollar that they bring in because there's ancillary effect, the nice parks, people walking around there, the quality of living, people moving here, developing more housing, creating more jobs. It's very hard to pinpoint, right, like where that occurs. I agree with you that we shouldn't overinvest, and I don't even think that this is the case specifically here. We have the money, we're borrowing it from ourselves. No one's happy about it, but I agree with your point. But I don't think that we're doing that necessarily. Everything that we vote for an expense has had a study, and we have assumed a mitigated risk, of course, but we've also looked at, through that investment, the profit. And if that profit offsets the cost of service that loan, I don't even think we can do that. I don't even think we can get in front of our skis like that legally in some parameters. So I think we do have confines and parameters, and I think we all try to look at that. So I'm saying I agree with you, but there is oversight to keep us from, being negligent to that to a high degree.
Bottom line, almost $600,000. There was some oversight, wasn't there? Something happened and something needs to be done. So I appreciate y'all's time and effort.
Thank you.
And we can
Very valid
guarantee you
comments.
there will be big changes coming in our Parks Department.
Any other public comments? We do have a motion and a second. We haven't voted yet. Let's have a roll call vote on Resolution 2024-13C, please.
Patrick Teveno,
No.
Carla Krebs,
Yes.
Lucy DiTillo,
Yes.
Josh Schaefer's absent, Joel Storm,
Yes.
Jim Bartlett,
Yes.
and Josh Wilbur.
Yes.
All right, council, moving on with year-end business and cleanup. Resolution 2024-14C, which is to transfer certain funds between appropriation accounts. And this details how the additional appropriations approved by council apply to each category within the budget. And it is broken out in three categories. One is called the additional appropriations approved by common council and DLGF, transferring it into the correct categories. The other one is miscellaneous year-end appropriation transfers, including remaining reconciling items, which are the 389s that Shirley has talked about before. And then the other part of this does take the proceeds from the resolution we just adopted and appropriates it to. I'll turn it over to Mindy. Had some comments on this resolution, and between Mindy and Shirley, they've worked on this the most.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. So, just so council is clear, we're gonna take this into sections. I'm gonna let Shirley talk about the first page. You do have an updated document in front of you too. I'll walk you through that step by step. That is mainly, communication between Shirley and I, how she needed to know where to put the funds specifically, and so we changed certain things about how they were worded, but the numbers did not change, other than some of them went down. So it actually is less money that needs to be transferred, so that's good news. But I'm gonna let Shirley talk through this first page, because this is Shirley's project. If you look at the appropriation numbers on the right side, next to the dollar amounts, you'll see those are all 389 accounts. Those are the old bank reconciliation amounts that had not been reconciled over the last couple of years, that have now been reconciled, and we need to account for where that money was spent. You approved a document last meeting, I think, or the meeting before, I think it was the last meeting, approving the additional appropriations, because technically that's what it is, to correct those. DLGF approved that as well, and those are listed here for everything that they've approved. There is a gap. They did not approve all of what we requested in general fund. So below this table, you'll see where I am taking care of the gap that DLGF did not approve with our 2024 appropriations. So Shirley, if you could kind of talk them through this page, then I'll take over on the actual transfer
Sure,
page.
so, okay, thank you, Mindy. So the 2024 14C, the front page is literally, except for the water electric, you see at the bottom, the water department, that is a Scrivener's error, so it is just really money in, money out that the State Board of Accounts has requested we put on a resolution. The rest of the resolution on that front page is literally from the public hearing that we had. We had 2 meetings. We had the ordinance passed at the last, December 17th, I think was the date. So the very last official meeting of the year, this is what you all had adopted. What had happened is when we got that adopted in and you approved that transaction, some of the things, as you saw in the tutorial, they went, instead of in the 300 category, they went into the 100 category. So it's something that you've already seen, you've already approved. DLGF approved it. They increased the appropriations for those dollar amounts, so that's not a problem. We just need to move it from one category to another category. One of the things I do want to mention, though, this is not an uncommon event to happen for Scrivener's problems and just general errors. If we enter something into a wrong department, it's moving from one category to another category. That's something that's pretty regular, that happens pretty regularly. So I would anticipate in 2025 bringing more of those to your attention, so we don't have so many at the end of the year. Most all of those are going to be something where someone has given us a wrong appropriation number, that the last 3 digits are in the wrong category. So usually it's not a big deal. Yes,
Quick question, maybe it's clerical, line 2. I know Mindy said that these were all from the 389 account.
catch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Except that
So,
one.
yeah, except for that one. So that one, Mindy, you can address. That one is her MVH project. So that was one of the big projects. So you want a CCMG project? You want to?
Yeah, so
address-
that's what council approved as well on the additional appropriation request, and then DLGF approved it as well. That is bringing the infrastructure dollars from the 23 budget that we didn't spend in 23, and it reverted back into 24, so we could pay off and close out that same CCMG project.
And that is something that had appeared on the publication. It appeared in the ordinance, and we did have the 2 readings on that. So that number was on there as well. It's just money when it drops back into the fund, because it's from prior years. We have to go through that entire process to pull it back in, to dump it into an appropriation so we can write those accounts, square those up.
Unless, there's another method there, which is encumbrances, which would also be a resolution like this
Yes.
one. This happened to be a payment that crossed calendar years. You either have to encumber it, or you do what we did, which is move that money from one year to the next, and that's all we're doing here, is moving the money.
And it's basically the fund report, the tutorial that I offered to you guys earlier. So if you go to the last page where you actually have the fund report, you'll see it under beginning balance of the year. So to get the money out of that beginning balance and drop it into those appropriation lines, that's the process. So,
clarification?
Yeah, yeah. Yes.
Mindy, did you want to talk about or did you already go over the miscellaneous and, anyway, or answer
I have
questions?
not. I'll move on if there's no
Okay.
more questions on that 389 section. So the next section is just the regular year-end transfers where we're moving appropriations from where they were appropriated but not needed to where they were not appropriated and were needed. So this is something that happens every year, but it also includes, when I mentioned that DLGF did not approve all of our 389 additional appropriations, they only approved 55,000 in the general fund. And Shirley, I don't know the number off the top of my head, how many of the 389s were in the general fund, but it was a big number. So I am correcting those in that gap with the remaining appropriations from 2024's budget that were not used. So this is where you're going to see that happen. And if you're looking at both documents, because I think Gina laid a new one out for you today, I'll just talk you through and make sure that everybody understands. The funds for parks, and I know this is confusing because you're looking at a lot of the same numbers and same references, but it's really, we need your approval to transfer the funds, and we also need your approval to tell Shirley where to put the funds once they've been transferred. So that's what we're doing here. The Parks General Fund has money available. That's where a lot of their revenue was going. And it's sitting there, but it hadn't been appropriated in the general fund. So we are moving the funds that are sitting there in the general fund over to their NRO and partly to their general fund to cover where things were spent from. That's the $757,000. That will correct part of their fund balance. And then right below that is the difference, the $575 that we needed to borrow from the sewer department to make up that difference. And that will also go in Parks NRO, the Parks donation, and the Community Development and Event Fund that currently have negative balances and or appropriations. So those two transactions together is the $1.332 million that shows negative in the Park NRO on the fund report, and this will correct all of that.
And I can answer a couple of questions. Minnie, I just passed around the tutorial that we had given to you guys a couple weeks ago. So when you're seeing in that, the very first section on that second page, that from Parks General over to the Parks NRO and some of it's, the categories are really where I need your approval. Like I said in the first page, there are going to be things next year. If it's just a categorical change, you're probably going to see a resolution. I'll ask the mayor to have that put on. That way there's not a bunch of those at the end of the year. But if we need to move on the tutorial, if we need to move from category 2 to category 4, if we're in reference to the green to the blue, I need to get your permission to do that. And the reason that State Board of Accounts has us do that is if I favor Parks Department over police and I decide I'm going to move money from the police department to the Parks Department, either way, I can't do any of that without your permission. So I know it's very, like Mayor likes to say, granular, but I follow the rules to make sure that you guys understand it's moving from category 1 to category 2, 2 to 3. It's just, you've got eyes on it, so hopefully you'll understand that tutorial again.
And the only new money that we're talking about, this 1.3 million, is the 575 that we're borrowing from sewer. The rest of it was appropriated for parks, and it's just going to the different place in parks where it was spent.
So that second section.
Just for the public's clarification, when we do our budget, when we did our budget like 18 months ago, we have to tell, and council approves, where every dollar is going in one of 5 categories, right? So you're estimating. And then as you true up, you're like, well, I needed less money in category 1 and more money in category 3, right? So the budget didn't change. There's no increased cost. Council's just approving, shifting it over so that our year-end reports shows it balancing rather than a negative and a positive. That, if that helps clarify.
It's perfect.
Yeah.
Any other questions on the park section? Okay, I'm gonna move on to the next one is the motor vehicle highway restricted. This is related to, that additional funds that you guys approved to bring in from last year, from 23 to 24. When I pay that bill to Omera, I pay it out of a lot of different funds. So this is dropping that money in to where it was paid from so that we're square. Okay. On the next page, starts with BPW, Category 2 supplies, $55,000. There's a change on this number because your original document showed we needed 62,300. That's actually gone down a little bit. I made an error and was looking at the wrong number. We actually don't need that much, so it's down to $55,303 that we're just moving where there were extra funds in Category 2 for BPW to these other places, mayor, clerk treasurer, economic development, cum cap, county tax, moving them there to cover expenses that came in through those departments. I'm gonna go on down to the fire. These two you'll see every year. We appropriate in the fire general budget $60,000 every year for their fire apparatus replacement. That goes into a fund specific for fire apparatus replacement. It's $60,000 because it's by contract to each of the 6 fire companies that will put aside $10,000 a year for each of them toward their apparatus replacement. So this is simply moving it from the fire general to the apparatus replacement fund where it will remain. If we didn't do this, that money would revert to the general fund. So we pull it out of there and put it into that apparatus replacement fund, which you can see on your fund report every year will go up. Same thing on the SCBA equipment. We appropriate it in our fire general budget, and then at the end of the year, or sometime during the year, we move it over to the SCBA fund so that the funds are available for them when they need to replace their equipment. Does that make sense? Okay. All right. The next section is the $76,000. That is for, that's just moving into common council. It's funds that are left over in the categories of the funds listed: police, MVH, police continuing education, economic development, BPW, moving it to the common council to clear out category 1 issues there. And then, so this is going to be a little bit weird to you. It was to me as well. Parks NRO, we're actually moving appropriations from Parks NRO to a couple different places. And the only reason we can do that is that while Parks funds are negative, their appropriations remained in the NRO because they spent from their general fund. Does that make, I don't know if that makes sense to you, but they didn't use the appropriations in the NRO. They took it out of their general, which caused them to be negative, and the appropriations I can use to clear these other 2 items up.
And Minnie, you might just clarify, this isn't cash, this is just
Right.
moving money between appropriate, it's accounting, it's crazy.
Correct. This is not real dollars.
Not affecting
It's
your bank.
just
City is healthy, it's got, I don't know, what are we ending the year with? $12 million in cash or something like that, but
Yeah.
it's accounting.
Yep. Okay, let's see, clerk treasurer to planning, that's a simple $5,500 that we're moving. I think on your old copy, you probably had historic preservation grant and Indiana Humanities grant that we were going to move that money into the general, but we Shirley did some research on that. Those are 2 grant funds that were established to to manage these two grants that Nicole Shell managed. Those projects have been done. They have been closed out with the appropriate entities that made the grants, and there were remaining funds left over. Those are our funds. We can move them into the general with your approval, but it has to be done as an ordinance, not as a resolution. So I have removed it from here. We will deal with that later and clean up, getting those funds back into general. But for now, I've just taken it off here because it legally cannot be done by resolution, has to be done by ordinance. So I took those off. All right, and then aviation, you will see on your old document a section where there's aviation money moving, and I think it was around $50,000 or so. I actually double counted that. So I just removed it from the original document and moved all the aviation stuff down here. It also includes what was on the other document, but they had, so I was clearing their general fund with around 50,000, but as Shirley and I went through the documents again, their ARPA fund had a 389 in it that I needed to clear, and their CRRSA fund had a negative that we're clearing. We asked the airport staff to talk to their board about this and make sure that they're good with us moving money out of their NRO to cover these. They were. We have an email from Brent Spry saying they're all good with that, so we're using their NRO funds to clear these 4 funds for them. And I think mainly the main issue was they paid a grant match out of their general fund, and they probably should have taken it out of their NRO. So we'll just correct that now. Okay. And then fire, so the 389s that I needed to clear that were not able to clear with the additional appropriations, the biggest one that I had remaining that I didn't think I was going to be able to clear it was in the police department category 3 at $113,000 unreconciled item that was sending their category negative $100,000. Because of the things that I had removed and reduced, I was able to cover it. I was able to use those funds to cover that 389, which is important because Shirley had made a commitment to the State Board of Accounts that all of the reconciled items that they had completed as of, 1st of December, we would clear this year. And that was a really tough ticket, but we were able to get it done. This $101,000 for police clears all of them. Everything that has been reconciled this year is fixed in this document. The only thing remaining will be next year. I think, Shirley, you have a few transactions that haven't been cleared.
Yeah, I think there's roughly 80 transactions, so it's minimal. We're working, please try not to laugh, but we're working on August. So we are racing through. We have until the middle of March to get our annual financial report done. So now that we've gotten through 1 month with our newest staff bank rec gal, once she got through with 1 month with the one biggest bank, we're going to roll pretty quickly now. Is just getting through that first month in our largest bank. So I feel confident.
And it's a much smaller dollar amount, if I understand correctly, because you guys
Yes.
tackled the largest dollar amounts first.
Yeah. We dropped quite a few
So if-
entries as well.
If you think about it this way, those unreconciled items, which was several $100,000, it ends up being, it feels like a budget cut for us for 24, because we are covering it with the appropriations that are left over from 24, and we have managed to do that by taking all the leftover appropriations and pouring them in here so that we can clear that previously spent item that hadn't been reconciled. So I hope that makes sense. I know it's confusing, but surely I will tell you, make sure that we do things exactly the way they need to be done, because she's the one who's going to have to explain that to the state board.
Yeah.
So I'm going to do what Shirley tells me.
Oh, God love you. Well, and just if you guys remember my chandelier reference, so you're looking at 22, 23, and 24 things that are spelled out here in this report.
So-
Last item on this is moving $25 from the mayor's budget over to the unsafe building fund, which is a fund that Nicole Shell uses. And I believe that $25 is probably a lien filing fee, which probably got taken out of there late in the year, but they haven't collected it back yet from the property owner. So I'm just gonna cover it so that fund doesn't end in the negative.
Again,
And that is everything.
I want to thank Mindy for her help on this. There are quite a few departments she's running quite a few plates for all these departments and trying to square everything up. And I'm busy running like a crazy chicken trying to get everything together for her to be able to get this information together. So I appreciate her help. I will, again, let you know that just look for these randomly throughout the year. I don't think it's fair to you all to dump everything at the end of the year. I just feel that that's overwhelming. It's overwhelming for me.
It is. So Mindy, the only one that I still don't understand is on page 2,
Yes,
the Parks NRO. Like,
yes,
the Parks NRO was big time negative, which is,
yeah.
one of our main reasons for being here today.
Yeah.
How do you take money from an account that's in the negative?
I can answer that.
Okay,
So if you
So-
look,
talk right into that microphone so everybody can hear. Girl,
wanna
you're
take
too
it
far
further, or
away.
you want me
yeah,
to talk about
I
it?
can take a partial of it and then you
Okay.
can jump into. So the Parks and Rec, that is unfortunately one of the few lines that actually was positive, and that was for employee insurance. And employee insurance was not being pulled from that, it was being pulled elsewhere. That is something that needs to be reimbursed by BPW planning, over to BPW Planning Preservation to help write those up. So if
But
you-
how could there be any money in there if it has a negative overall bottom line?
Yeah, if you're looking at the Parks NRO, that dollar amount there is already calculated into what the entirety of the Parks NRO was negative. So it's not undone from that balance, if that makes sense. Does that make sense?
And
No.
remember that the fund report.
We can
actually
talk about it afterwards. I'm just not getting it. It doesn't make any sense to me that we're taking money from a fund that has negative blah, blah, blah. So we can just do it
Well,
afterwards.
Well, that's
We're only
just the
taking
distinction here.
appropriations.
We're not taking, it's an appropriation thing, so you're moving
Yeah, it's
budgeted
not
monies
fund.
around. So you don't have a negative budgeted item and a positive budget item, you move the money to where you need it, so they're both end up at zero or positive.
I get why we're doing the transfers. That's just that particular fund
Yeah,
that I'm struggling
it's
with.
It's awkward.
Okay,
It is.
No, I'm
We'll just-
still, before we go to a vote on it, though, I still would like to try to understand it better. I think Carla and I are both
What's your
still
specific
confused.
question?
Specifically, the Parks NRO from Category 1 Personnel Services, 102,000 to BPW and Planning, is that 102,000 positive in that specific category within the Parks NRO, but then
Yes.
cumulatively throughout the other categories, that's what's dragging the NRO down?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, so we could find that in here?
So you can see, there's the 100.
I'll say so it would be in this.
There's correcting fund dollars and there's moving appropriations.
Okay, so
Two
full
different
Parks
things.
NRO.
Fund dollars is cash in the
Okay.
bank, which we have about
102
15 million in
I
liquidity.
see, you're right. So it's
Budget
a little
dollars
fund.
are these
Little
appropriations,
Employee-
They're two
employee
different
insurance.
actions, and that's
Okay, it's
confusing.
Okay.
That's just government accounting.
And that was going to reimburse the employee insurance that was paid out of
Yeah,
those two
personal-
funds?
Personal services, yes. Does
Thank you.
that help?
Yes,
Yes,
very
that was
much.
very.
Good question.
It'll be cleaner next year. We're gonna try. That's our goal.
Are we ready to make a motion on this? Do we need discussion? Does anybody else have any questions?
We could have a motion in a second, and we could open it up to floor if there are additional comments or questions. Have a motion to approve resolution 2024-4.
I'll make the motion to approve the resolution.
I'll second.
Any additional discussion, comments, or questions? Roll call.
Oops, sorry. Patrick Taverneau,
Yes.
Carla Krebs.
Yes.
Lucy DiTillo,
Yes.
Josh Schaefer is absent, Joel Swarm,
Yes.
Jim Bartlett,
Yes.
and Josh Wilbur.
Yes.
Council, our next meeting, which will be a regular meeting, January the 7th at 5:30 back here. I want to wish everyone a safe New Year's. Lots of activities happening around the city. Please get out and enjoy town. Turn it over to the council if you have anything to add. Otherwise, we'll have a motion to adjourn. Well, yeah, good.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thanks.